All right, well, it looks like at least a few more people have trickled in, so we'll get started. First of all, welcome everyone to the May meeting of the Ward 5 NPA. My name is Billy Clark, and I'll be moderating for at least the first part of this, and I'll try to follow the instructions that we give for all people who speak. My name is Billy Clark. I live on Locust Terrace in Burlington, so I'm in Ward 5, and very excited to talk with you all tonight. We've been an interesting discussion going forward. Just to give a little introduction to what is the NPA, just in case this is your first meeting. Oh, no, not how to use a Zoom webinar. We all know how to do that. But these are the guiding principles for our NPA. We are a safe space. We provide a safe and welcoming forum for all views. We seek to be accessible. We cultivate involvement with a diverse spectrum of community members, and we seek to minimize barriers to participation. As you can hear, my children are already trying to breaking down the barriers to participate. We are respectful. We are inclusive and culturally and economically aware.
Daddy, I know what
Yeah, that was fast.
doing it.
I know you can join in a second.
Okay.
We are vital, clearly. We are a fun, creative, and vital organization. We value varied perspectives, and we are nonpartisan. I think that's in some ways the most important thing that we are. We are a forum for discussions, but we are not here to endorse political candidates or endorse things. We are here to bring community members together. So this is a Zoom webinar. So just in case you're not familiar with the webinar format, if you want to participate, there's a little raise hand function that you can use, and I will try to make sure I keep an eye, and we'll ask my fellow steering committee members to keep an eye as well if there's someone who wants to participate. And when you raise your hand and we acknowledge you as the speaker, you can unmute your mic and speak and turn on your video to contribute. And with that, I'm going to switch over to the agenda, which I have on our handy dandy Ward 5 NPA website, which is not immediately showing up. Hold on, my Winnie. Can't find the agenda. Well, I know what the first item on the agenda is, and that's public forum, which is where members of the public can speak about any issue they want. So while I look for the agenda, I'll open up public forum and see if there's anybody who wants to contribute. All right, and I see Jovial King with your hand up. So let me see if you are allowed to talk. You should be allowed to talk now, Jovial, if you unmute.
Okay, I should be unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Jovial King, and I live in the North End on Lakeview Terrace, and I am part of the team that is planning to redevelop 453 Pine Street in your neighborhood. So I just wanted to introduce myself. We're planning to have a bathhouse and a bowling alley developed in that area with federal and state funding. So I just wanted to just introduce myself and say I'm happy to chat with anyone that has any questions or concerns or wants to give us more feedback. So I just wanted to put it out there. So my email is jovialking@gmail.com. That's jovialking@gmail.com. If you want to be in touch, I'd be more than happy to get together for coffee or answer any questions.
Well, thank you so much, Jovial. I definitely have some follow-up and would love to find a time to talk with you. And I think we as a ward may even want to talk with you about coming and giving a little fuller presentation in one of our future meetings. So
yeah, I would love to. Absolutely. Yeah, sounds good.
Great. Well, yeah, and so I'm very much looking forward to future conversations there.
Great. Thank you so much.
Of course. And I see Andy Simon, fellow steering committee member, has his hand raised, so I'll recognize him for public forum. You are still muted. Oh, there you go.
Okay. Hi, my name is Andy Simon. I am on the Ward 5 steering committee, and but I wanted just to do a report, I brought up last meeting, I brought up the Green Up Day event at the Pine Street Barge Canal, which directly relates to what Jovial was talking about, since that's where the bathhouse and bowling alley are planned to be built. And I wanted to just give a report on that event on May 7th on Green Up Day. We had approximately 140 people who showed up for that event and worked from 9 a.m. until I had to pull some people away at 4 o'clock in the afternoon because they were so kind of like, you know how you get when you're cleaning something up and you really want to finish it? Well, it was time to stop, but there is more to do. But we got about 325 bags, garbage bags of garbage out of the woods at the barge canal. We also got a lot of bulky items that were too big to bag, and some a big pile of scrap metal, and many bags of recyclable cans. So it was a great success, and I just wanted to give a report to people in the ward on that, since we'll be, there'll be a lot of attention on that land, and we have a group of people, and I have formally incorporated with the state as the Friends of the Barge Canal, and with our mission is to care for and speak up for the land, the water, and the current inhabitants, which range from mycelia threads under the ground to Canada geese on the water in the barge canal. And that's our essentially our mission, is to be the voice for all of the living beings that are inhabiting that wild land. And I will definitely be reporting back on what we're doing. And I look forward to working with as many of you as possible down there to make that a better place for all of us. Thank you.
Great, Andy. Thank you so much. Andy, can I ask, what was the strangest or most fun thing that you found in your searching through?
Well, it's interesting because we started out with that. We started out with the idea that we were going to do a treasure hunt, and quickly found out that became aware of the fact that while there were very many interesting things down there left behind, mostly by homeless people that had lived there, including lots of stuffed animals, and a pair of purple high-heeled shoes, and one of those magic 8 balls that you tell your fortune with. The other side of it, the sort of darker side and more dangerous side, was that there were many used hypodermic needles. That so we did not do the treasure hunt because we instead decided to organize into teams with a couple of team leaders who were pulling the stuff out of the old encampment sites, and designated people who were coming in on a signal from team leaders to pick up dangerous things. So there were many interesting things out there. Among them, the memories of many people who had made that place their home for years. And it really brought home to people who were cleaning up all that day on May 7th, how urgent it is to really address the questions of homelessness and the desperation that lead people to live out in the woods in a wetland with their kids, and also the desperation that leads them to take drugs, so and be addicted. So it was an absolutely joyous day, and everyone was who was out there, including Jovial and her husband, were I think aware of the darker side of it too. Thanks for the question.
As is often the case, Andy, a flippant question from me leads to a very thought-provoking and interesting discussion from you. So I really appreciate that. It does, flag the houselessness issue and the safe disposal of these things, and finding safe places for people's possessions who are in those situations. So really good things to flag. Terry, I see your hand is up, so I will stop blathering.
Hi, everybody. My name is Terry Rivers. I'm also a member of the steering committee for the NPA. Andy, I guess my question, maybe for Jovial also, is this planned bathhouse bowling alley going into the space that you cleaned up?
The answer is mostly no. We mostly cleaned up on a parcel of land, and I can let Jovial answer the question too, but parcel of land the city owned, 11 acres that are to the west toward the lake of the land that Jovial is planning to buy and build on. There was cleaning up done for sure out in the front part, especially by families with kids. We didn't want kids in the woods, and so kids were working with their families some out in the field where the private parcels are. So no, we were in almost entirely in on public land, not on the private land.
I would say though that there was some cleanup done on the private parcel, which was fantastic. So as you guys know, and as Andy has been really, bringing forward to folks, that the whole Barge Canal area is, I think, 28 acres, which is, privately held city land. And so what we're going to be developing is the 4-acre parcel right along Pine Street, which is mostly that open field area. And there's 501, which is all forested, which is part super fun site. And there's a huge dump that's just absolutely endless. So that land will be going into innovation. And it still needs a lot more cleanup to be done, and that help, we can do that with the entities help. That open, parcel is what Rick has owned, and there was less than, in there. It was really kind of more in towards canal.
Jovial, your audio is cutting in and out a little bit, just to let you know.
Thank you.
Oh, I stopped talking. I don't know if you want to do another question. Okay, sorry.
I have another point to make on a different topic, although somewhat related, but a different topic. So again, I'm Billy Clark on the steering committee, but I speak now just as a neighbor and a parent. As some of you may have heard, and some of you on this call are intimately aware, Stepping Stones Daycare, which is a excellent preschool daycare facility right on the corner of Hayward and Howard that has been there for many, many years, was just listed for sale. The business and the building are currently listed for sale. And so we're in this transitional period where this excellent small daycare that's done a great job of creating many children in this neighborhood and fostering many children through faces a bit of an uncertain future. And so a group of parents has been in discussions about potential ways forward. And mostly what I just wanted to do tonight was just make people aware that this is happening. And, if you're interested, if you have experiences with it, if you want to, hear more, feel free to reach out to me. My email is on our website, but it's also just WTClark, CLARK 21 at Gmail. This is how you get kids like that to be coming all around. Hey, Winnie, do you want to say anything about Stepping Stones?
I love Stepping Stones. It's my favorite school.
Well, so I can't say it any better than that. So
I love school. It's my life. I love it.
that's so good, Win. All right, well, I'm going to put us on mute now.
And I got my butt wet, and
So-
Mom had to change when it was really funny.
So that was the story about the awesome water slide they had at Stepping Stones. It is 7:17, so we are coming up to the end of public forum. If there's no one else, I will get up our agenda, which I now finally have up. And I believe it's the first thing we've got going on is a presentation about the Champlain Street Park. And I believe I saw Max here. Max, are you there? You are.
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everybody.
Excellent.
Hi, Max.
All right, so, hi. Glad to hear you like your school so much, too. Stepping Stones is pretty cool.
Yeah,
All right, I'm going to pull up my presentation. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right, so I'm Max Medalinsky. I am a project coordinator for Burlington Parks and Recreation. I happen to know a number of the folks on this NPA. Used to live right on the corner there at Pine and Locust Street in the Jackson Terrace apartments, but no longer, moved up to the new North End, but still love seeing everybody whenever I can. So I'm here to talk to you a bit about Champlain Street Park. In case you're not familiar or don't know where this is, it's one of our smaller parks in Burlington, so I actually get this a lot when I tell people I've been working on design for this little pocket park at 187 South Champlain Street. So in the upper image here, you can see between King Street and Maple Street, at about mid-block is this green dot here. This green park dot is Champlain Street Park, which is this long, skinny lot between a large brick building and what's currently a vacant lot, but is planned for like a 3-story duplex at some point. So the park is in needs kind of an update. A lot of the fencing is in pretty poor shape. If you've been by there, the sign is due for replacement. The garden beds are due for replacement. The playground's due for replacement. So it's all stuff that's sort of coming to a head. And so we got started on this before the pandemic, doing some outreach, and got put on hold for a little bit there while budgets and stuff got sort of shuffled. And then starting up again last fall, we got back into doing our outreach, went around to all the NPAs giving a presentation, just saying that we've got some funds set aside to work on the park, went and tabled in the park for about a week or so, had a lot of online surveys and worked with AALV to get those translated into a few different languages, sort of recognizing that there's a lot of people speaking a lot of different languages, particularly in this area of the city. And in total, we ended up with about 89 survey responses. We had about like 20 to 30 different people that we talked to at varying in-person events. And if you're one of the people who gave us a survey response or came and talked to us, just thank you so much for all your thoughts and feedback about what you'd like to see and do in the park. So here's a little summary of what we heard. On the left side of this slide is some responses to informal questions we were asking, sort of open-ended things. And on the right side is just a count from both our in-person questions as well as all of those survey responses of the different kinds of activities people would like to be doing in the park. And there's a pretty strong correlation between the two in terms of sort of the more open-ended questions, as well as what we kind of heard from people that they'd like to be doing activity-wise. So relaxing, swinging, gardening, things that are more passive and not very high energy were kind of the things that were up at the top of people's lists, and things like exercising, spinning, running kind of came in down at the bottom here. And similarly, we heard from a lot of people, they really wanted to continue to do a lot of the same things that they've already been able to do in the park, but really would like to see it just get some attention. A lot of concerns about safety and visibility, especially with the park being so deep and long and having lots of vines and things like that growing up on the fences around it that prevent you from being able to easily see in and out of the park. So we kind of took that and came up with just some basic design directions for where we could go with things. So to add some lighting to the back of the park to make it more visible, to replace and expand the playground, to replace the benches and generally just add more seating in the park, to open up a little bit of the view that's available to the west. You can actually see through to the lake when the timing is right and trees aren't quite in leaf out here, but there's so much brush that kind of needs to get cleaned out. To open up the fence lines and increase the visibility into the park, and to remove the broken garden beds that are in the park, but not without adding additional gardens or additional plants and keeping it green. From there, we kind of came up with a general design scheme for how we could lay out some of those different amenities and activities that people are asking for. So starting sort of at the back of the park, we thought this made the most sense to locate the playground back here. That way you're putting the most active part of the park in the back, where it's going to really draw people further in. And it also will still be contained on 3 sides by fencing, which will just make it way less likely for somebody who's there with a small kid that their kid's going to run out into the street. They're kind of a little more contained. It's just a little bit of a safer experience in that way. And then next we were figuring for seating areas, benches, gardens, things like that, putting a lot of that up at the front of the park, where if somebody's going to be hanging out, sort of sitting, stopping by quick on their walking past the park, it's kind of making it a little more welcome, showing you that that space is there for seating. And then also just offers increased visibility for anybody hanging out in the park or outside the park to kind of just see what's going on, who's there, and sort of adding that eyes on the street kind of feel. And then lastly, just leaving that sort of informal open lawn area kind of between the two that allows things to kind of overlap from either side. And yeah. And then lastly, we just have a light that will, we're looking at getting installed in the back corner of the park to add some evening visibility. So for the playground, I'm going to show you 2 different concepts for the park that we came up with, but we are using the same concept for the playground in each of these. And just a quick note on this, this is sort of put in here as kind of a placeholder. This item is going to cost so much that it's going to have to be competitively bid in order to comply with city procurement policies. So we've kind of put this into these designs just as to show you what the kinds of things we're looking at and the relative scale of it. So we're picturing the playground will have sort of rubberized surfacing, bright, colorful materials, lots of sort of arching supports and see-through net climber type things like that incorporated into it, so that it really gives the park clear visibility straight from the street all the way through to the lake at the other side. That's really one of the things we were thinking a lot about, is how do we make this skinny, narrow park that a lot of people are telling us feels unsafe or too dark or hard to see into, feel more open, feel more spacious than it is, and feel more visible. So with that said, some of the activities we're looking at trying to provide here is sort of a larger climbing structure that could be used by older children, and some concepts of that are sort of shown up here at the top. A basket or group swing, which is sort of an accessible amenity that somebody in a wheelchair could transfer in and out of, and to site that kind of as close as we can to the southwest corner, so that in theory, somebody could be sitting on that swing and sort of also taking in the view to the west at the same time. And lastly, here to have sort of a dedicated structure for the age 2 to 5 group, so toddlers, things like that. We heard quite a bit in our outreach from school groups, or not school groups, sorry, wrong term, daycare groups that bring younger children here, as well as mothers who live in the surrounding apartments that are coming here with their kids who really want to make sure there's something for that younger age group. And again, we've got our basket swing in the middle here, and sort of some concept images of the types of structures we're looking at on the bottom. And here we just did a little 3D model of this to sort of show what it could look like in a little bit more detail. Again, it's very high, bright colors to sort of draw your eye to the back of the park. Clearing out a lot of that brush and putting in a lower 3-foot tall fence there so that you can see cleanly through the park and make it feel a little bit more open. And trying to sort of make sure we're providing those activities we heard from the community.
Max, you have 2 very excited children here who think the playground looks great. So
I want to play there. I'm going.
Oh, Winnie's going right now. So
Well, it's not there yet, Winnie, but we'll keep you posted. All right, so the first sort of design concept we came up with is what we call the gentle curve. This concept puts sort of a main walkway to that playground, sort of your accessible path, into sort of the shadier side of this park. We spent some time looking at this large building that's slated and has been permitted to be constructed on the south side and thinking about how the shade might affect things there. So we thought we could have it sort of curve gently down here so that we're putting our hardscape into that shade where we're not going to have as wide a range of plants that we can get to survive there. And also by adding that little bit of a curve, it just kind of makes the playing space, the lawn space a little bit larger, a little more open. And then locating sort of some stone dust seating up at the front. Again, we're thinking doing something hardscaped here so that you've got better accessibility down the line. And lastly, putting a few boulders up at the front just to offer a different type of seating and also to create a little bit of an entrance and make it feel like you're stepping into a park from the street. And then looking at the landscaping, taking advantage of what full sun will kind of be remaining, we're thinking we would put a lot of gardens and possibly some understory trees under these existing trees to the north along the north side of the park, trying to keep it green. Citing a couple swinging benches just sort of along that pathway, one out here at the playground and one just kind of sited along the way so that, you know, when this is sunnier in the summer, this would still be sort of a shadier spot for people to go sit here and here. And then adding just like this small little section of fence where we could mount our park sign that would also sort of act as like a screen for things like trash cans located here, as well as bike racks and stuff like that. Again, we built sort of a 3D model of this to show what it could look like. This is one style of seating we're looking at for the park, is sort of these bistro style tables with fixed seats and that kind of thing. So that it's someplace you could sit, eat your lunch, and sort of enjoy the park a little bit. And this view is looking straight from the sidewalk kind of through the back of the park. And again, you can see how we've tried to leave it really open, clean sight lines, clear straight through to the lake. And then this view is just kind of looking back the other way toward the street from about the playground. All right, so the second concept I'm going to show you tonight is one we call the wandering walk. And you can see sort of the main difference here is just the way we chose to sort of make the walkway meander a little bit into the sunlight, making that walkway itself just a little bit more interesting, a little bit more of something you might be a little bit of an experience. Again, looking at siting benches sort of on either side in sun and shade. Instead of having this sort of pad kind of spill out into the sidewalk here, using some site-built planters at the front to again make that welcoming entrance, but also create sort of a nestled in little bit of a room up here at the front that feels a little bit more like a quiet pocket. And looking at the landscaping, again, where we can, we want to take advantage of that sort of northern full sun area here. We expect this area in front of the building will act a little bit as kind of a sun trap, so maybe a little microclimate that'll be a little bit warmer. Mounting a sign onto the front of these site-built planters. Instead of having our bike racks in the park, actually pushing them up to the front here so that if you're arriving on bike, it's just right there, very visible. We've included in this concept sort of putting some vines to offer some screening into and out of the neighbors' yards and parking areas and things like that, but also just to add additional greenery to the space and to sort of put some shade tolerant shrubs on either side of that lawn just to make it a little bit more of a contained space. So if you're kicking a ball or something like that, there might be something there to catch it and keep it from just rolling out into the street. And here's just what that could look like in a 3D model. And looking back from the playground again, out toward the street. So in addition to hearing from you today, just a little bit about what you think about each of these concepts, which ones you like, which ones things you don't like. We'd really like to hear quite a bit about what you think we should prioritize for improvement first. These are some of the different components we're looking at and are starting to make some steps forward on already. But if any of this stuff is really jumping to the front of your mind that you'd really like to see improved, first and foremost, we'd like to hear about it. In terms of next steps, we have gotten started on cleaning up some brush vines and landscaping and stuff like that. Actually, it's Nate Lantieri, who's on your NPA and is one of our parks commissioners, did a great job of organizing a bunch of people for Green Up Day to go and clean up a lot of the brush that's sort of been growing along the fence lines. We are also going to be proactively removing a bunch of ash trees along the western edge of the park, just recognizing that emerald ash borer is on its way up here. We will continue to preserve, there's a couple hackberries that are tucked in there that we'll save, but we know those trees are going to be in decline in the next, I mean, it's kind of just a matter of time before it gets up here and they will become a hazard tree for the park. So before we invest too much money, we want to make sure we're taking those down. I think this is actually our last NPA that we'll be presenting at. I've been to Ward 6 as well as Wards 2, 3, sort of covering all the wards that butt this park. We have posted the concepts to our website and have a survey that's up and running, which I shared the link with Nancy, and it'll be on the next slide here. So that'll be in your meeting minutes. And then we'll sort of incorporate whatever we hear through that last bit of feedback into a final concept for the park as we continue to sort of move along with implementing and getting some of this stuff done. So thank you all so much. Questions, ideas, comments? So I'm seeing something went wrong with my presentation slide here, but got my contact info down here as well as our survey link and the project website.
Thank you so much, Max. That is awesome. I am going to step away for one quick second, but I see Nancy already has a comment, so I'm going to kick it over to Nancy to give a comment and then to take over moderating duties just for a few minutes. Not the whole time, just a few minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Billy. Hey, Max. I think you might be able to guess what I'm going to ask. And I know you've told me, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Callahan Park too and the progress for the playground there.
Yeah, I'm totally happy to talk about that.
Oh, do you want to wait?
Should I jump straight into talking about that? Because I have some other stuff I can show you, but I'm gonna have to sort of switch up my screen a little bit.
Okay, we can pause and see if other people have questions about the Champlain Street Park. Actually, I guess my question about it is, you mentioned that Nate did some cleaning of it. Will parks do some more of that? Like, it seems like that's like the first easiest step is like actually just like cleaning up the park.
Yeah, so some pieces I'm working on right now is getting in touch with some fencing contractors. I'm basically pulling together quotes for all of this stuff very actively as we're sort of going through last bit of outreach and seeing what people want to see, or like which of these concepts they like better, like things they do like, things they don't, what they want prioritized. But the reality is, it's like we want to be able to move on this as soon as we have sort of finished hearing that. And part of that is just getting estimates for all of this so that we know how much these things are actually going to cost versus sort of like your estimate based on, you know, comparable things that we've done recently and all of the other ways that, you know, we design people price things out. So, you know, it's one thing to sort of have a pretty good idea and have a sense of what it's going to cost based on all of the other work we've done, but it's another thing to actually get a formal quote from your contractors and get all of that stuff lined up logistically and into their schedules, because, you know, people fill up pretty quickly, as you can imagine, through the summer. And then other things that we're just constantly doing is, you know, we're constantly picking up trash and doing that kind of stuff. It definitely always helps to have community groups, especially with a small pocket park like this, who can step in and help with taking care of it and reporting things to our staff and that kind of thing.
Cool. Andy, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm curious to know, Max, if you're done any work with the landowner to the south of you who's planning to build this building and has been for a while, about design of the building and how it impacts the park.
We have talked to her a little bit. And she's obviously aware her building is going to shade our little park. I know it's one of these things, like we can talk to her and say what it's going to do and make our recommendations, but we don't really have any direct jurisdiction over what she does on her property. And so we're kind of in this area where it really isn't something we have a lot of control over, particularly given that she's gone through the permitting process already and her plans have already been permitted. So we continue to talk to her and sort of like work through like thinking about our shared fence line, like what is something that we can do that, you know, works for everybody, that she's been trying to press us to build like an 8-foot tall fence along this, and we're just said that is just too tall and doesn't really work with what we're hearing from people in terms of the park being not super visible and that kind of thing. So we're definitely in conversation with her, but yeah, we don't really have much control over the design of her building, unfortunately.
And if no one else has another question, Max, I was also wondering, I know with Callahan, we did the whole planning, but there wasn't actually like funding for a lot of the pieces. Is the funding like set for this?
Yeah, so we have $70,000 approximately that are dedicated to this park. We have a little bit more funding that we can pull from another source for the rubberized surfacing that you're seeing under the playground, which I would estimate that item is probably going to cost between $25,000 to $30,000, somewhere like that. So total, that's like $100,000 budget, you know, which sounds like quite a bit for a little park like, but the playground itself is probably like a $50,000 cost for those pieces of equipment plus install. And then fencing is probably another $10,000 to $15,000. So that budget gets eaten up pretty quickly when you start looking at those numbers. We have been sort of talking about funding stuff. Nate Lantieri, who's been organizing, has been talking to his employer, CBOEO, about possibly contributing some funding towards this park and some of the amenities, things like that in it. And we're kind of still working through that sort of stuff. But yeah, we do have some funding that is ready to go like immediately right now, this fiscal year and next fiscal year, to start implementing this stuff.
Great. Does anyone else have a question on the Champlain Street Park before Max talks about Callahan? Does not look like it. Yeah, so Max, if you could just give an update on Callahan, that would be great.
Yeah, so I was ready for this, Nancy, as you have been flagging me on this one for a while. So,
I'm very invested.
Yeah, first is like a couple of renderings of the structure that we're working on. So we put out an RFP back in December for the Callahan Park Playground, got a number of bids in, and decided to work with this particular contractor on sort of the design and construction of this. It's a company called Champlain, which is based out of Denmark. And after going through the master plan, we heard quite a bit from people who wanted to see natural materials incorporated into the new playground and thinking about nature-based play. So I've got a couple of renderings I can show you, and I can give you a little update after that on schedule and walk you a little bit through what's included here. So the thing in the foreground here is sort of a parkour obstacle course, which has a bunch of ropes and sort of these Robinia timbers here that kind of go through, and it's lots of different like balancing and climbing activities. If you actually stop by, I think it's Center City Park in South Burlington, this piece that's in front here actually it can be sold in sort of extendable versions. This is kind of like the largest version of it, and they have, I think, these first 3 components there. It's a little bit always hard to tell in these renderings, but for scale, like this wooden bar here is at about 6 feet in the air. So it's a pretty challenging little obstacle course and quite a fun little thing. And then this tower sort of back here consists of multiple platforms and sort of a seating area for kids here with some slides, a shorter slide coming off to that side. And then it goes up to this taller tower, which is at about like 10 to 11 feet at the base here that comes down, and you can't quite see it. Maybe we'll see it in one of the other renderings here, but there's a climber net on the other side that actually comes up to sort of a window that you can climb through to get into that upper tower. Some other components here, sort of nestled in among that parkour course, is this sort of double somersault bar, sort of a playground staple, as well as one of these spinning cups here. So you sort of sit in it and the thing rotates around like a carousel, and it really like cups and holds children into it. Included in this is a small like tot lot type structure, you know, something designed for like really young kids, toddlers, and you know, kids who are kind of taking their first steps, really starting to get engaged with those gross motor skills, you know, and sort of keeping it separate from those larger structures so that they have their own sort of designated place to play. And then tied with that are a couple of spring toys, again, made out of that Robinia lumber, that'll be sort of facing each other like this. And then the last piece you can see here is what's called a tippy carousel, which is a larger carousel spinner that has this grab bar so that you can stand on it, sort of as these rendered kids are here, or somebody who's in a wheelchair can be transferred into this and the whole thing can be spun around. While in this first phase of implementing the playground here, we won't have any funds to like construct pathways in Callahan and put in rubberized surfacing. We're thinking that down the line, that could happen to make these spinners and this cup and potentially some of this structure here more accessible for people with mobility challenges. And yeah, and there's one more close-up rendering of that. So that gives you sort of a sense of what the new structure will look like. And in terms of schedule, we just got our ship date from the contractor last week. That was set for August 4th, which I'm waiting for a final response from them if that means it's going to be here on August 4th or it's being shipped on August 4th and then it's going to be here a little later. But so loosely, we're looking at the month of August is when the new playground will be going in. And prior to that, probably in like late July, maybe a little sooner, you'll see some stuff that's ancillary related to getting the site prepped for that new structure to get going. So like the old structure will need to come out at some point. There's some old concrete light poles that are in there, some bushes, and quite a bit of excavation that's going to need to get done in advance to sort of prep the site for this. So that stuff we expect to get going on July, and that's kind of on our city end to take care of.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We're really, really looking forward to it in this house.
Yeah, I'm sure Sophie is ready to get out there and mess around on a new playground structure.
Yeah, definitely. Does anyone else have any questions on Callahan? And Billy, can I hand it back to you?
You thoroughly can. I have returned. I'm looking to see if there are any other hands raised. I do not see any as of yet. Well, seeing none, thank you so much, Max, for coming, and we will definitely eagerly look forward to this park and the Champlain Park in our household and throughout the neighborhood. So thank you so much for all your work on it.
Yeah, great. Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.
All right, and we are running a little ahead of schedule, but let me just pull up my agenda here. And I know the next thing we got up is the South End Innovation District presentation. And I see, Charles, are you doing that? Yeah, there you are.
Yep. Hi, Billy. Hi, everybody.
All right, I will pass it over to you if you're ready to go.
All right, let me try and share my screen. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I am here to talk about the South End Innovation District, which I'm sure you've all heard a bit about Megan Tuttle, Planning Director, and Samantha Dunn were with you a couple months ago to very briefly introduce the Innovation District work and sort of, where the city and the community were sort of looking at the district. And so we've spent a couple of months now thinking about the district and have worked with property owners, stakeholders, artists, makers, representatives of different groups to sort of start to create a framework. And so that's really what we're here to talk about at a very high level today, is the sort of outline of a zoning overlay approach, which is how we intend to implement the district. And so this is going to be very high level. Keep in mind that we will be back in front of you in a month, and actually less than a month, to present what will be a much more detailed draft zoning approach for the Innovation District. And so tonight we're really hoping to, like I said, present the outline, get your thoughts, give you all some time to go back home, think a little bit more about this, and then get back to us with more feedback. And I'll talk more about next steps at the end. But really just want to start with this slide and make it very clear that the Innovation District is certainly not starting from a blank slate. I would say that in many, many ways, we are fortunate as the planners in having Plan BTV South End, on our desks to refer to. The work that you did with my predecessors and current colleagues in creating Plan BTV South End is extremely strong, and the concepts that are in the plan, the themes, the goals, the principles are very much imbued in a foundation for this Innovation District. So all of that work that really meant to highlight makerspace, artists, a burgeoning Innovation District in the South End is very much part of the zoning work we're working on now. With the added sort of element of housing, as some of you probably know, Plan BTV South End sort of explicitly said that housing should not be encouraged in the district. I don't think that was necessarily a unanimous opinion, but nevertheless, that's how the plan put it forth and was adopted. Since the plan was adopted, though, I think everybody has sort of seen how the housing shortage and affordability problem in particular has become so much more sort of acute in Burlington and the South End. And so very much we see the mayor's Housing as a Human Rights Action Plan married with Plan BTV South End in creating the foundation for the Innovation District. So everything that you wanted to see in the South End from Plan BTV South End with housing added to it. So just for everybody who's not familiar, this is the map of what we envision the Innovation District being, this area in orange. So generally it is from Howard Street in the north to Sears Lane, the properties on Sears Lane on the south, and west of Pine Street. And importantly, it will include the Champlain Parkway, which will run through the heart of the district. And also importantly, the barge canal is not part of the overlay district itself, but we are very much taking into account the needs of the barge canal and the community's sort of hopes and visions related to the canal in terms of ecology and open space into the zoning work. And just again, want to reiterate that this whole notion of the Innovation District to begin with did come out of Plan BTV South End. So if you do have any questions, it's been very helpful for me, as I'm sure some of you know, as a relatively new planner with the city, to have Plan BTV South End to refer to. So I recommend rereading that if you haven't lately. So this is just the last thing I'll say about the plan, and this image really doesn't differ too much in terms of what we're thinking the district may look and feel like. Buildings may be a little bit taller, ultimately out of the innovation district. But generally what you see here, this very green, walkable, pedestrian, bikeable environment is, I think, what the innovation district will ultimately hope to produce as the area evolves. So there's just, sort of a set of key points and concepts that I think we are working with now, and very much would love to hear what you think about all of this. So the Innovation District, as you know, includes some very large undeveloped properties, some properties that have some, brownfield contamination issues. And so this is going to be an evolving district. It's not as if this area is going to develop overnight. We very much see this as a mixed-use area with a range of building scales and types, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. It is a place, like I said, for new residents, so likely could accommodate over the next 5, 10, 20 years, hundreds of new homes and neighbors. Importantly, again, this is an area where in the South End, there's already a very established character of arts, lights manufacturing, and a burgeoning sort of office district, and we very much intend the Innovation District to continue to foster all of those characters. And finally, the last thing I'll say is that the concept of innovation does run through every single sort of element of the work we're looking at here, and so really looking at ways to encourage or incentivize very highly sustainable buildings, landscapes, a district that will clean the water and foster a healthy ecosystem in the area. So just a little bit about land use here. The uses that we're considering permitting include residential uses, and those would primarily be in the form of attached multifamily dwellings, as they're called in the Comprehensive Development Ordinance. So that's generally apartment buildings, anything from 3 stories, probably potentially 2 stories, up to 6, maybe 8. But generally buildings will be attached. We'll talk a little bit more about uses we're not considering in the future in terms of housing, but do want to say that these other uses, co-housing, assisted living, group homes, these are things that we certainly would like to consider how we can facilitate them in the neighborhood to create a really dynamic and affordable and diverse district. So in terms of non-residential uses, these first 3 bullets on the left, so art gallery, studios, light manufacturing, office. So again, those are the things that coming out of Plan BTV South, and we know the community supports in the Innovation District. And the remaining bullets are really those land uses that can and should support a residential district, but sort of be ancillary to them. Certainly looking in the Innovation District work at ways that we can permit things like cafes, restaurants, coffee shops, childcare, while not necessarily allowing the district to be completely defined by commercial uses like that. And so would love to have your thoughts on land uses, the types of uses that you would like to see. We've heard a lot from some stakeholders about childcare. We've heard a lot about artist space, community uses, that sort of thing. And so, please, like I said, love to hear your questions and thoughts on that. The last thing about land use here, so uses we're currently considering not permitting include these on the left. So single family homes, generally just not consistent with the housing goals that the mayor has set forth in terms of density and the number of units he would like to see. Hotels, so this is one we're thinking about. Would love to hear your thoughts. In many innovation districts around the country, I think we've seen hotels probably sprouting up in higher numbers than most communities would like. And certainly there is a risk that the Innovation District could become a sort of tourist hub. And I think we want to think about that and how we may or may not permit hotels or limit them if we do permit them. And then the sort of last 3 bullets, heavy manufacturing, large format retail, auto-oriented uses. These are just, uses that aren't really consistent with the concept of an innovation district. I think light manufacturing, we can talk more about the sort of difference between light manufacturing and heavy manufacturing, but this image here of the sort of waste management truck, that sort of represents heavy manufacturing to us. And so we think that these sorts of uses shouldn't be permitted. But very much would like to make it clear that light manufacturing, we do see that as part of the innovation district. So just a few slides, I'll go quickly through these about urban form. So we very much see the innovation district as being one where buildings are close to the streets, close to paths, close to open spaces. So I think Church Street, we'd love to see pedestrian streets. We'd love to see a very bikeable district where buildings are close to the street, where appropriate. I think we'll have to think a little bit more about Champlain Parkway in particular and how we would like buildings to be related to the parkway. Similarly, just a bit more on that, we definitely want the ground floor of buildings to be what we call active uses. So that's shops, community uses, childcare, that sort of thing. We want this to be a place where you can walk down the street and sort of see all types of activity going on, all types of work, people doing art, making things, office workers. We want you to be able to look in the windows on the ground floor and see that stuff going on. In terms of building types, generally would love to encourage a mix of attached and detached buildings. So these are just a couple images of eco districts. Both of them are actually from Europe, but you can see how there is a mixture of sort of larger attached buildings that sort of define the street wall, and then some sort of more detached apartment buildings that create some density, but in a way that permits a lot of light and air into the neighborhood and creates a ton of green space for kids and maybe some new parks to go, just to follow the parks presentation. In terms of building size and height, definitely would love to encourage a mixture. So, you know, the Bijou Bistro on Church Street is a great example of how a one-story building can very peacefully coexist with a much taller building. The image on the right is again the eco district from Malmo, Sweden, where they sort of very gracefully mixed in sort of an ecological design approach with buildings that are 1, 2, 3, up to 5, 6 stories. In this district, there's even a very tall sort of 30-story skyscraper, which, don't worry, I think that's not being considered here. In terms of transportation and open space, again, very much would like to see the district focus on accessibility for all users, focus on pedestrians, focus on cyclists. To the extent that cars are traveling through the district, we want to make it clear and clear to everybody that they should be sort of subordinate, I think, to that pedestrian character. So we're looking at ways in the zoning to make sure that new streets are developed, but in a way that makes moving through the district safe and comfortable for everybody. And also looking at ways to incentivize or encourage open spaces, plazas, that sort of thing as part of developments. So the last piece about urban form here, again, and I mentioned this earlier about, you know, innovation being part of the sort of whole ethos of construction and development here. And so we very much see, you know, things like green stormwater infrastructure, highly sustainable construction types like mass timber and passive house, and even things like bird-friendly design being a part of the zoning framework here. So it's a very important ecological part of the city. We know that the barge canal is right next door, the lake is right next door. There's a brook just to the south of here. And so we know humans aren't the only creatures living and enjoying this area. So we want to make sure that the Innovation District continues to sort of foster that sort of diversity. So we'll take questions after this, but just want to say next steps here. So we're here tonight in front of you, and we'll be back. The next step, we'll spend a month, like I said, continuing to take feedback and work with our partners in the city and without the city to sort of finish drafting out a framework that we'll bring back to you in June. We're also targeting the last week in June for a public meeting. We will confirm that date with you as soon as we can. But that will be a second opportunity for you to provide feedback. So you'll likely have between the June 16th meeting and the public meeting a week or two to sort of gather your thoughts and come to that public meeting prepared to provide more feedback. And then, yeah, ultimately the plan here is to get the zoning amendment to the Planning Commission to begin that public process in July with a target adoption date, assuming you all are comfortable with it and City Council and the mayor are comfortable with it, of having it be adopted by the end of the year. So I'll stop talking now, and really happy to hear what you think about this and any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Charles. Really appreciate the presentation. I will keep an eye out for raised hands. I will say I do, sort of have this immediate reaction of, I think all these goals are laudable and said in a good way, but as with so many of these things, the proof ends up being in the pudding. And, the recently announced projects of a bowling alley and a Nordic bathhouse, some of which we were hearing about earlier, I have to say my immediate reaction is that they don't necessarily jibe with some of what was just articulated. I mean, I was just looking over the plan of the bowling alley in particular, and I see a pretty massive parking lot in the back. I don't see any housing being added from either of those. They're very single-use oriented buildings. They're not multifunctional. And I also have to say that when the state is providing $6 million as a part of that, and I understand it's earmarked money for environmental cleanup, and one of the reasons that that's being done for these projects is the statement that, well, it's not zoned for housing yet, and yet we're about to have this rezoning that's happening. It does get me a little concerned. And so, I don't know if that's anything you can directly speak to, but it's just, I want to make sure that, and also with the multifamily, housing, making sure that or the multi-unit housing, making sure we are creating family housing as well. It's not going to do us much good in our housing crunch if we're just creating a lot of very nice condos for out-of-state people. A bunch of people buy second homes with a beautiful lake view. That's, I guess, good for the economy, but not necessarily good for the housing problem. So those are two just sort of off the cuff points. But
Sure, I'm happy to answer, respond to that, and then, or if others have questions. And I should say that Samantha Dunn, I think Samantha's here from CEDO. She's worked much more closely with the issues related to the Barb's Canal, much more closely than I have, and I think she could have an answer if she is here on the proposed development of 453 Pine, the spa and the bowling alley. So, right. So just on the spa and the bowling alley, yeah, they are in the innovation district boundary. Obviously, one way I could answer that is just to say in terms of timing, that property owner has been in negotiations to sell the property, and there's nothing we can do about that. I will say that given the contamination that is on the site, it does make residential uses a bit more tricky, right? There's also the soil types under the spa and the bowling alley. I can't speak definitively on this, but I do know that the amount of cleanup that it will take to enable any use, I think, would probably be increased if residential uses were being contemplated, particularly if sort of heavier buildings, the scale of which we're talking about here in the Innovation District, were developed. You might imagine it may be necessary to put buildings on piles, that sort of thing. So that's what I can say about 453 Pine. I do think that the uses that are being considered on those sites, not necessarily incompatible with the neighborhood. I mean, I think they are uses that people would enjoy being around. But yeah, I mean, open-ended question. If Samantha's around and if she has anything to add, be happy to talk more about that. And this is something that, yeah, we can talk more about internally. Billy, if you and others want to have a conversation about it, or with your council member, we'd be happy to do that.
I will just jump in. I think Charles did a great job, and would just say again that that the redevelopment of that property is something obviously that landowner has been trying to do for, I think, more than 3 decades, and was engaged and is engaged as a stakeholder in this process of the zoning amendment, and fully supports the concepts. And I think, you know, as Charles said, it really was a matter of timing of something being able to move forward when it was available. In addition to housing not currently being allowed under our zoning, that site does have institutional controls on it that do not allow housing as well. So there's kind of a double layer of no housing on that site, which I think, as Charles was referring to, was going to make it, you know, harder. I think we included it in this area because we really were looking at where there was undeveloped and underutilized parcels that would benefit from being in an innovation district. And I hear that the uses might not, you know, they certainly don't address our housing crisis, but as we have started these discussions about the district, what we heard a lot from other stakeholders, really everyone was like, how do we create a place where people can live, work, and play, basically without using a car, you know, like all in this centralized area. And so I think in that way, it will be a compatible use. And again, just to confirm what Charles was saying about, you know, because of the nature of that land going up on it, like in multiple stories, as you would need to do with housing or more mixed use, is technically very difficult.
I appreciate that, both of you. Someone at some point will have to explain to me how a Nordic bathhouse is going to be able to go into a Superfund site. I understand some of the barriers, but I just keep thinking of Ibsen's Enemy of the People, but that's neither here nor there. I will pass it over to Jane, who I believe had her hand up first. Jane?
Thanks. I wanted to know if you're going to plan on having any, I mean, banks or grocery stores in the innovation district. The one thing that the South End lacks is a place to bank, and whether for people that have trouble walking, I mean, will there be any kind of public transportation for them to go through if they can't walk very far without help? I mean, will there be? I mean, I can envision having I guess non-motorized vehicles, even as, I mean, driven non-motorized vehicles to shuttle people.
Yeah, great question, Jane. So just the first part, uses like banks, grocery stores. So banks, as we're conceiving it now, and remember this is all draft, would be permitted. And grocery stores, I think, would be permitted more on what we call conditional use. So generally, we're, I think, thinking smaller format grocery stores, no large format grocery stores likely, but definitely also looking at ways to improve access to City Market, which is very close by. So either via the path along Champlain Parkway or potentially a new path to connect to that market, looking at ways of increasing sort of food security. Generally, though, the answer is that any use that I think you might find in an urban neighborhood, a sort of tighter knit urban neighborhood, we would either consider to be permitted or at least conditionally permitted. In terms of transit and accessibility, yeah, I think that's a very important issue for us. I think that we're going to hear a little bit later about a feasibility study for 68 Sears Lane, where there is perhaps some potential to develop a transit center that would probably increase transit services, but nevertheless, I think transit services will be traveling up and down Pine Street, up and down Champlain Parkway. So for folks who cannot or do not want to drive, there will almost certainly be bus service in the area. There's also some, it's right next to a railway, and as Amtrak service opens up soon, we're looking at ways to sort of improve access to the train station from the Innovation District as well. But just again, in terms of the types of districts we would love to see developed here is one that is very much focused on accessibility and pedestrians and cyclists. So yeah, any way that we can make sure cars are either not present or driving very slowly, perhaps not parking too much on the street, making sure cars are parked in structures or underground, making sure that it's really safe and comfortable for folks who are on foot or on wheel themselves.
Thanks.
Could you stop the screen sharing so we can see each other?
Sure.
I was going to pass it over to you, Andy, anyways, as the next person with their hand up. And I actually, Andy, if you don't mind, I will pass moderating duty over to you because I do need to go try to get some children down, if that's okay.
That's great. So before I take over moderating duties, I do have some comments about more than there's time for here. But generally speaking, I just want to encourage you, Charles, Samantha, Megan, other people from planning, to listen more and talk less. I feel like there's, in your willingness to answer questions, unfortunately, you wind up talking a lot. And I thought your presentation was really well done, but you really, I think, and when I look at the schedule that you had up there, it doesn't look like there's a lot of opportunity for people to actually give input. I mean, the NPA is one opportunity, but there needs to be a wider. We have 20 participants, and half of them are, city employees or consultants right now, and that's, it's just not enough people to count this as a input that you're getting. And I only saw one public meeting on that schedule, except for the other NPA in June. I just that's my general reaction. I do think that there's lots of reasons why housing was discouraged by the last round of Plan BTV South End, and it was one of the large concerns with gentrification, and the artists in particular in the arts district were worried that new housing would raise prices and price them out of the market. People who actually are sort of working and appreciating and creating in the fairly funky districts that are relatively low cost. I want to note also that Stepping Stones, that was brought up before, the child care center on Hayward Street, is at risk of disappearing as a child care center in this district, and needs support from the city. There needs to be ways of keeping these high quality child care businesses in business. And while we're talking about these wonderful images of Malmö, Sweden, I just think that we really need to focus on what we have here and not losing it. I also have a lot of thoughts about the barge canal, but I don't want to take a lot of time with this right now. And finally, I just want to say that there is a disconnect between the fact that we're building a new highway down into to bring cars into the city through the South End, and a desire to have cars being subordinate to bicyclers and pedestrians. I think there's when we say that this Champlain Parkway is going to be a 25-mile-an-hour roadway. I would like to see whether you can make that stick, tell you the truth. I live 1 block from Pine Street, and which is theoretically, you know, a policed area, but it's a drag strip, you know, and it's not safe for pedestrians. It's not safe for bicyclists, and not safe for children who are crossing. So, you know, there's a lot that I think needs to be said about this innovation district, and a lot that's good about it. But the fact that you would even mention hotels and act like you couldn't stop those from happening seems crazy to me in a you know, in a housing crisis. So I look forward to other opportunities to talk about this, and I hope many more opportunities. So I am now the moderator, and get off my high horse. Are there other people who would like to comment about this? And we also are on a time schedule for tonight, so we had a little more flexibility, but I think we're running out of that flexibility. But are there any other comments about the Innovation District?
I have one question, if I could, Andy, about the spa, the Nordic spa. I didn't realize that there was a large parking lot associated with that. And has that been given permitted approval?
It has not been completely permitted. I think Samantha probably has a better answer than I do.
Yeah, no, they have not come in for their permits, definitely not. And I think Jovial was on the call earlier this evening, just giving a heads up, wanting to make sure to introduce herself, and will certainly be back in front of the NPA with the proposed project before submitting a permit application. So she'll be here to talk through those plans before she gets a permit.
Other comments, questions? Well, Charles and Samantha, I really thank you for coming, and look forward to having you back. I think that you know, the presentation that's coming up will certainly dovetail nicely into what you've presented, and I think there's a lot more discussion to be had, and I'm glad you came to the NPA to do it.
Thanks a lot, Andy. Thanks, everybody.
So now we have David Saladino. We also have other presenters from VHB as well, right? Jeff Doobie and anyone else, David, from VHB?
Just the two of us from VHB, and then Samantha Dunn is sticking around for this as well, and then Charlie Baker from the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission is on as well.
Okay, great. Well, take it.
Oh, all right, Samantha, I don't know if you wanted to say any introductions, or I can jump right in.
I think you can go ahead. I think you probably have the best handle. Just this is this feasibility study that David's going to talk about is really a joint effort between the City of Burlington and the Regional Planning Commission, and even within the city, it's well coordinated between CEDO and planning and the Public Works Department. So it's got a lot of people engaged, and David and VHB are doing a great job of bringing us through it.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna, this is a perfect segue or transition from the previous presentation, and I'm gonna follow the guidance and your previous guidance, and talk very little. And what we're really doing is want to get some initial input as we're getting this project started. So just a few kind of high level slides to kind of set the stage, and then we'll just open up for any thoughts or questions. So at a very high level, what we've been asked to do is look at the feasibility of a transit center at the 68 Sears Lane parcel in the south end. You can see the map on the right. So we're looking at, looking for really any yellow or red flags, any fatal flaws on that parcel, which is owned by the city of Burlington. Looking at an estimate of parking demand for the parking garage that would go with the transit center. We're going to be looking at two different conceptual layout options, one with housing, one without housing. We'll be developing conceptual cost estimates for those two options, looking at for funding streams, and then doing our best to get out to stakeholders and communicate the information to stakeholders. In terms of project schedule, we're really just getting started. We had our kind of project team kickoff meeting about a month ago in April. We have about a 10-person steering committee, a number of city departments and local stakeholders involved there. Here we are at our first public meeting tonight. Coming out of this in June, we'll be developing some alternative sketches. So those two different concept sketches. The second round, what's noted here is the second public meeting, we really see as a more robust outreach round. So we'll be doing things like going to the farmers market, going to Feldman's, going to some of the local businesses with the boards to try to solicit as much input as we can, even person on the street interviews to gauge as much, get as much input as we can. From there, July and August, we'll be looking at those two alternatives in comparison, selecting one of those, developing a preferred concept plan, and then presenting a final concept in August. Just an overview of the project area. So we're looking at the yellow outline, the 68 Sears Lane parcel. You can see the red hatched line is the Champlain Parkway right-of-way. So that property will be utilized by the Champlain Parkway going forward. 68 Sears Lane is about 3 acres. As I mentioned, it's owned by the city of Burlington. You're all familiar with the area, so you know all of the adjacent uses. Lots of gray asphalt on this image here, so lots of surface parking. Part of the idea here is really to start to consolidate some of this parking and in some density to then free up the surface parking spaces for some higher and better uses. You can just see here on the right, this is just kind of with and without the Champlain Parkway. Many of you are familiar with that orientation. Some of you may have been around or familiar with this study back in 2006. There was a study of this exact parcel looking at a South End neighborhood transit center at the time. You can see on the right the concept that was developed for the transit center at that time, how it fit into the parcel and tied into the parkway. In today's dollars, that's about a $19 million transit center. It was a 3-story garage, about 600 parking spaces. You can see underneath in the orange where the buses drop off and pick up. What's really driving this are a few things. Obviously, the Champlain Parkway is hopefully moving forward. As you just heard, the residential zoning overlay is being discussed, and plans for the 125 Lakeside Avenue are advancing. So lots of things kind of coming together to make this more interesting looking at the future of this parcel. So in terms of potential uses, mentioned a transit center, so an area for buses to pick up and discharge passengers. Then a parking garage. Right now we're looking at about 600 spaces. We're talking with all of the institutions, with Burlington Business Association, some of the other businesses in the area to see how much parking demand there is. 10 years ago in the previous study, it was about 550 to 600. So we're feeling it's about that same range. And then, as I mentioned, there's some potential for housing, whether it's affordable or market rate, to fit into that parcel as well. And then we'll be developing those two concept alternatives. Just a couple of images, just to kind of set the tone here. The top two are in Vermont. One is the new one in Transit Center Montpelier, upper right, you're familiar with in Burlington, and then the two below are outside of Vermont. Just some kind of precedent images here. Also thinking about the garages, we don't want to just lay out a kind of a standard concrete block garage. We really want to look at kind of state-of-the-art, cutting-edge applications for garages. And one thing one trend that's just starting to emerge, the idea that we're hopefully not all going to be driving cars forever, and hopefully not for too much longer. And so a lot of the parking garages are being designed now with these modular components, so that as parking demand goes down over time, presumably as people are autonomous vehicles or using some other modes to get to their destinations, you've got these little slots that can fit in, either apartment or retail slots that can plug into the garage and essentially use the same physical structure, but not as a parking garage, as either an apartment building or retail uses. So some of those concepts, and you can see on the right some of the other opportunities to kind of plug in some recreational facilities, restaurants, and so forth. And then the idea is we talked about some potential to integrate some residential uses. Could do that as a wrapper around the garage so that you're not seeing a garage from the street front. You can see here just some examples and images of those wrapped garages. We have a great example here in Winooski, right downtown, just off the circulator. We've got the BSAC building is a parking garage in the center that is wrapped by a similar brick building. So that was just a very quick high-level overview. Where we're going from here, as I mentioned, concept plans in June, and then we're really going to be putting a full court press through the month of July to get as much input as we can on these two concepts, and then wrapping up in September with our final report. So I've got some questions here. If there's any questions, but just some prompting ones. One in particular question I'm curious if anyone has thoughts on is the idea of residential or not residential on this parcel. Is there a desire to see some kind of mix of uses here, or utilize as much of this space to fit as much parking as we can, and then put the residential on adjoining parcels? That's one in particular I'm interested in, but also open to any comments, thoughts, or questions.
All right, let's open the floor to questions. One question I have, David, is are the slides, these slides, and any other ones that you have available for people to view in a more leisurely fashion?
They were, and I had sent them over. I didn't see them on the website. I will make sure. And I'm forgetting. Is it Joe?
Yeah.
Joe, yes, we did send those over on Wednesday. I will check back with him though to see if he can post them on the NPA website.
Okay, that's npa5.org for people that haven't been there. So that's great. So we'll post them on the website. Mm-hmm. And is there anywhere else that they can be accessed for people?
Yes, there is the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, so ccrpcvt.org has. That's where the project study website is.
Great. Thank you. Questions? Comments?
I have a question. So we don't have enough parking garages downtown to accommodate the numbers of cars that are coming into Burlington. Is that why it's being built?
No, not for the downtown parking demand. This is really more for the south end parking demand. It's really in response. Well, I guess my sense, and I'll let Samantha answer it on behalf of the city, is just looking at all of the surface parking that's down here with the Innovation Center, with the 125 Lakeside, the parking we were just talking about up at the bathhouse. If it's possible to consolidate these into one structure, then you can have green space or some other uses, better uses on those lots. But I'll let Samantha answer if there was another driver for the city.
I think the intention is, as David was saying, I mean, somewhat to accommodate parking in the neighborhood, because we're trying to make better use of the surface parking lots, and just to act as an intercept facility to have more pedestrian scale access and use of the city as a whole, so that you would, if you're coming from outside of the city, you could park there to visit those businesses or housing or things like that, and but also to potentially get on a bus or on the bike path and visit other parts of the city, not in your car. I see Charlie's probably going to give a better answer than I just did.
Not a better answer. I just additional answer, I think, and the group already kind of touched on this, is that Champlain Parkway is going to bring cars into the south end. And I think as 15 years ago, this initial concept was, that is not the ideal. How do we get those cars not to go further into the city, intercept them here, have them park, and have them, as Samantha was just saying, you get on other modes, whether it's the bike path or walking to local businesses or getting into a bus to get someplace else. So it wasn't, this idea is not to replace anything downtown. It's really to try to mitigate the impact of the parkway on the south end.
So what studies have you done that indicate that people actually park at that parking garage versus driving downtown?
This is that study. So we
And
don't
you
have the
have
answers
data
yet.
you have data that shows that people would prefer to leave their cars at a transit center rather than to use unused parking garages in town.
So that is where we're in the process of quantifying the demand now. And based on the previous study of the 600 spaces, there was maybe 100 spaces, maybe a little bit less reserved for general public or downtown businesses. The majority of those 600 spaces were for the institutions, so UVM, Champlain, and the medical center. And so that's really taking those trips out of the institutions and the downtown, bringing them in on the parkway and parking them in this garage, and then shuttling them to those destinations.
So you've already arranged with these larger institutions that employees would park their cars there and that they would have shuttle buses coming to the transit center to bring them there?
Nothing has been arranged yet. That's part of the discussions that are going on right now.
I see. Okay.
So yeah, I kind of feel like there's a lot of assumptions that are being unspoken. This is we call this a feasibility study. This is truly a first step in looking at the questions that you're asking. There's nothing that's been decided, determined. Nobody's decided to build a garage. There are no decisions that have been made. This is the beginning of a process to look at what's feasible, what might make sense, and have that conversation with the community. So we're literally at the very beginning stages. The consultant, Dave, just got started a few weeks ago. Having said that, I will say 15 years ago, there was some work done and the city acquired this parcel with this idea in mind, but that hasn't gone anywhere in 15 years. So we're kind of reopening the box, if you will, to re-examine the issues.
Well, feasibility to me seems different than is there a demand? So, is it feasible to build a transit center seems different than the city requires a transit center. So it sounds like you're going to be looking at whether or not, my thing is people drive from South Burlington, Essex, they brought their car in. Will they really park their car there, walk into town, take a bus into town? Well, people who are using the Nordic Spa, maybe 500-600 yards away, actually park their car there and walk down there. That's really where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all very good questions, and that's exactly the type of thing that we're getting into right now. And when we come back in July, I would hope we'll be back here at the NPA and we can show you some of those concepts and talk a bit more about the parking demand and how we've quantified those numbers.
Okay, thanks.
When David and others, when you did a charrette, was it last week or was this week?
It was last week. Yep.
Last week. And that was for stakeholders. Who were the stakeholders?
It's the project. There's a project steering committee. So there's a number of city staff members, local adjacent property owners, and then other, Green Mountain Transit, Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, VTrans, kind of the typical kind of public entity stakeholders you would imagine.
And what came of the charrette? Were there different ideas that came out of that?
Yeah, it was kind of a brainstorming event. So lots of trace paper, lots of sketching, just starting to articulate some ideas. Nothing really fully baked yet, and so we're working on those concepts now. And that's those will morph into what we're going to be presenting in July.
Other questions from people? I see Carl's hands up.
Yeah, first of all, just thank you for coming to talk to us here. It's my first time at, second time at one of these NTAs, and it's really great to see this kind of engagement new to the area. So comment and question here. First off, comment side, I just have to throw it out there. Given what we know about the state of the world at this point, every new parking space we build is a mistake. It might be a necessary mistake, but it's really something that we need to be moving much more rapidly than we are to discourage. That said, on the sort of local transit front, everything I have seen about really successful bus systems relies on sort of removing them from the normal flow of transit that cars are taking and making them run regularly. Those are the things that you have to be able to do to get people to really think about them as an acceptable alternative mode of transportation. So do we know anything about what Green Mountain Transit would be ready to do in terms of service increases if this transit center were to be built?
No, we don't know the answers. GMT is part of the steering committee. They were involved in the SRET and are starting to think about the existing services that run down Pine Street, about detouring them down Lakeside and then coming down through this property and then out Sears Lane. But in terms of service increases, it's a bit premature for them to kind of be committing to any increases at this point.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? I think we have about 10 more minutes if there are other questions or comments. So David, and Samantha, the process, and Charlie, the process that you're engaging in right now is just to think about feasibility. Is this, at one point, does it become a more of a reality and actually enter into some kind of permitting situation, a permitting process?
I'll let our charge is really to develop a report, a feasibility report that identifies red flags, potential red flags, and cost for this. It'll really be up to Samantha and Charlie to kind of care if anyone wants to pick up the recommendations and carry them forward.
I would say this isn't just like it's not like a box we're checking before we come in for permits. It's a true feasibility to understand if this is something that makes sense. So I would say, there's quite a bit of time between this and something actually being permitted.
And could you talk a little bit more about how the Innovation District proposal relates to the feasibility question of the transit center?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it relates in a number of ways. One of them is obviously just geography. Another one is really thinking about, as David mentioned, there's a large surface parking lot that's 125 Lakeside, where there is the owner, desires to build a lot of, to build out that site and create a mixed use development with a lot of different housing types. And the reality of what happens on that parking lot right now, while I always think of it as empty, the reality is it has about, I think, 350 to 400 people who park there already from those institutions that David and Charlie were talking about, Champlain College and the medical center. And so we know that those are cars that would be displaced by something that we want, which is housing. And we don't necessarily want those cars to go, and I think housing is the most likely thing that would cause that lot to be redeveloped in the near future. And again, as Charlie was saying, we don't want those cars, continuing to come in and to go directly to those institutions, and there's no place for them to park. So that's one component of it. I think there's also an opportunity to really think about transit-oriented development. Like if there's going to be, dense housing development on that site, the idea is for people to really be able to live there and not have a car. And so that's why this is not just, it took me a while to be like, the transit center is a parking garage? Like that doesn't work for me. Like it's supposed to be a transit center. And it is more than a parking garage. It's really about multimodal transportation and ensuring that if we bring housing, additional and denser housing into this part of Burlington, that people have a way to move about the city without getting into a car. And that 125, so that adjacency where that's the most likely place for that to happen next, makes a lot of sense. And timing wise, there's some opportunity to work together on the development. At the charrette we were talking about, how do we kind of use both of these sites? Not, each person would still, entity would still own its land, but how do we design streets and pedestrian connections and things like that for a multimodal transportation center. So just working together, it's a very large undeveloped area in the city, and being able to look at these things at the same time, the potential for residential development and the potential for a transit center makes a lot of sense. So we can, you know, if the transit center makes sense and the zoning amendment passes, that those things can be at least planned in tandem to work together.
Jane, you had a question.
I guess a comment when you said about talking to different groups, it's like just going around to different complexes and apartment buildings and I guess I mean I guess you have to find out like about who is in charge, or live at Flint Avenue Housing Co-op and it would be nice to, I mean, and you could contact us, and I mean, and ask, and we have well, that we have a community room, and we also I mean, people. I mean, a lot of people meetings by Zoom, but there's also other, and there's also other places. But anyway, so that's a comment about trying like the school, Champlain school apartments nearby, but and also about the schools. Have you you know the students come into school to school every morning, you know, in buses. Would this is that the potential for having the kids get out the buses would go to the transit center instead, and that might take some of the pressure off the streets. I mean, people park along the street dropping off their kids. Would that, yeah, how would, anyways?
That would be certainly nice for Pine Street, but I worry it's probably too far of a walk to have the kids walk over to the Champlain school. But I like your thinking, you know, to get all of those drop-offs off of Pine Street. But I'll let Samantha address it. But I think probably not for school kids.
Well, it's a really interesting idea, and I think I don't know that I like the buses I would send there. I mean, I think that makes sense for the buses to keep going to the school. It's all those parents' cars that I think are the challenge, and I think the real hope, and again, and another opportunity for overlap here is with the innovation district to really work hard on pedestrian connectivity throughout the South End, again, making it easier, more convenient to bring your child to school on a bike or on foot, that there's safe pedestrian connections, and a pedestrian connection certainly from this area, but would allow, if there's buses going to the school, for those buses to continue to go. And I think that's sort of the idea of helping people get away from using their individual autos, is to make it more convenient to get there on a bus. Like the bus will drop you at the door, but your car is not allowed to do that somehow, or it's just trying to make it easier to use these other forms of transportation. But that's a really helpful way of to think about.
Thanks.
So we have one more minute on our schedule, and Terry has something to say, and there's a lot more people that I hope that will be involved in this discussion in the future as this goes forward. Terry?
Yeah, I just have one comment, and that is that if I had realized there was a companion project hopefully being developed, this dense housing project on 125 Lakeside, in that large parking lot, that would help, you know, from my point of view. And given that, I would prefer the wraparound building of the parking garage, similar to the Winooski, but that would be a good thing.
With housing in the wrapper?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just worry about the crime that's being committed in our downtown garages currently, and I might mitigate against that.
Well, David and Samantha and Charlie and Jeff, thank you for coming, and Charles. I think that we'll obviously have lots more to ask and to say in the coming months, and I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody that came tonight and asked questions and listened well. And we will have another meeting in the third Thursday in June, and continue on from there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.